Hi my loves, welcome or welcome back to my channel. Welcome if you are new. Today we are talking about the 9 books I read in September. I had a pretty good reading month overall. Like considering how busy I was, I really didn't think I was going to get that many books read. So 9 is a very good number for me. Overall, it was a good reading month. I don't think I had any like spectacular, amazing, jaw-dropping reads. I definitely had some very like intense reads that I'll explain more about later. But overall, it was a pretty like just decent reading month. Like they were all just fun books. I didn't really have any like big letdowns either. I didn't have any DNFs, which was really great. So yeah, I'm excited to talk to you about them. In the month of September, I read 3 fantasy books, 4 romances, 1 contemporary fiction, and 1 YA thriller. I would have liked to have read a lot more fantasy if I'm going to be completely honest, but like when you're so busy, sometimes you can't focus on like high political world building. You just need to have a fun little romance in your hands. So anyway, without further ado, let's just get started. The first book I read in September was Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. I have been wanting to read this book for such a long time. It's been on my physical TBR for like almost a year now, and I finally got to it. I feel like I was just so intimidated going into this book because I feel like lots of people either absolutely love it and it is like one of their favorite books they've ever read, or they just find it really, really boring and cannot get into it. I was kind of thinking I was going to find it really boring, but I think I picked it up at the perfect time. I just wanted a cute, cozy kind of fantasy to cuddle up, and I literally read this like most of it in one sitting on the couch with a cup of tea, and I feel like that was the perfect atmosphere to be reading it in because it just hits so good. Also, I think the fact that I just like read a bunch of it straight away, I think that like made me get into the story quite quickly, whereas if you were going to read like 20 pages now, 20 pages in a few days, like I feel like it would be a little bit harder to lean into the story. But basically we are following Emily Wilde, who is a scholar and is currently completing and writing the world's first Encyclopedia of Fairies. She goes to this particular village to kind of do more research on fairies and like kind of understand them a little bit more, and she bumps into her academic rival Wendell Bamberley. Also, the names in this are absolutely stunning. I love these names. Emily as a character herself, I really, really liked. I feel like she is really awkward and she doesn't really like prioritize love. She's just a very like unique, original kind of character that I haven't read before, and I thought that was really fun. She's just so like not cutesy, like literally just so unique. I can't even explain it properly, but I loved her so much in this. I thought she was so cute. So it's a cozy fantasy, but there is like a romance kind of subplot, and I felt like that romance subplot was done so well in this. It was so cute. Honestly, I just loved it so much. I'll definitely have to continue this series just because of the vibes. Honestly, the vibes are just amazing, and the cover, absolutely stunning. Overall, I gave this book a 4 stars. I thought it was good. I thought it was fun. There was nothing I can really like criticize about it, honestly. It was quite slow moving, but as I said, I read it in like the perfect kind of time, and it's not very long. I think it's literally like, it's just over 300 pages. So I feel like it doesn't drag out too much at all. And it kind of like, it works that it's slow moving. So if you go in expecting like a just wonderfully cozy kind of fantasy that just like, oh, it just makes me like, it makes my heart feel warm. That's the best way I can describe it. The next book I read in September was actually a choice from you guys. I did a reading vlog of reading your 5-star reads. Quite a few of you recommended The City of Brass. This is the start of a trilogy. I loved this book. I'm just going to say straight away, I literally had the best time reading this. It was so unique. It was so different to anything I've read before. The characters were amazing. I specifically loved like the mythology involved in this. I thought it was absolutely fascinating. So we are set in Cairo in the desert, which number one, never had a setting like that before in a fantasy book, or at least I've never read a setting like that in a fantasy book. Our main protagonist is like a kind of thief, manipulator, trickster. That's how she kind of makes her living in this sense. She usually like tells people's fortunes and that kind of stuff. Then whilst practicing one of these spells she didn't actually realize worked, she summons someone to her, a kind of protector, and realizes that she actually has magical blood in her, because you can't do that if you don't have magical blood. This kind of like initiates a whole adventure, and there is a subplot of romance which I really liked. It is multiple POVs as well, which I didn't know going in, but I really enjoyed it. Definitely going to be continuing this series. So when I asked for 5-star reads, I feel like when people said this trilogy, they were talking about the trilogy as a whole, not necessarily the first one. I gave this a 4.5 stars. Like I loved it so much, but it just didn't give me that giddy kind of 5-star feeling. However, I do have hope for the rest of the series that I might get a 5-star out of it, because like apparently it just gets so much better the more you get into it. Yeah, I thought this was amazing. I initially thought this was YA fantasy, but I don't think it is. I think it's technically adult fantasy. Either way, amazing, wonderful, highly recommend it. Then literally on release day, I read Deadly Occupants by Mads Rafferty. This, I was so excited for this release. It is basically pitched and described, and I feel like it sums it up perfectly after reading this. Pretty Little Liars meets Paranormal Activity. Like, it is so much fun. It is, I would say, a YA thriller, but we are following 4 girls who are roommates in college, and they go on a haunted house tour. At that haunted house tour, something paranormal happens, something spooky happens, and when they return back to their normal lives, there are just weird things that keep happening. This was just so much fun, and like the twists just gripped me. I read this in like a day because, I don't know, it just was so gripping and I needed to know. I loved all of our characters. I loved like the diversity in all our characters. Like I feel like everyone can find someone to connect to. I just had such a fun time reading it. If you're going into a book slump, like this is kind of the perfect book to read. I don't usually give thrillers 5 stars. Like I don't usually rate them. So I'm actually giving this one a 4 stars. Like I loved it that much. And it is pretty rare for thrillers to get high ratings for me because usually I will guess the plot twist or I'll just find it really predictable or I'll just be bored throughout it. Like it takes a lot for a thriller to grip me and not let me go and actually connect to the characters. And this one did that so easily. So yeah, I gave this one a 4 stars. My next read is probably my most like amazing, impactful read of the month. But I will say, please look up trigger warnings before you go into this because I didn't know that I had to do that and it was quite confronting. And this is Btown by Frederick Backman. Again, this was one of your 5-star read picks. And I have heard like a little bit about this. I've often seen it in shelves at stores, but I've never been intrigued enough to pick it up. I am so glad I finally picked it up. I don't know how to explain this book because I feel like I don't want to spoil anything, but basically we are set in one of the smallest towns in Sweden that is on the edge of a very big forest. The only thing this town has going for it is hockey. They are a massive hockey team. They have a massive like high school hockey team, or just there's a lot of energy around that high school hockey team, and they look like they have a run and a chance in the championships or something like that. I don't know what the terms are. I'm not a sports girl. But basically everyone's mind in this town focuses on hockey. And if you don't, well, bad luck. I found this fascinating. I loved the writing. It definitely like gets a lot more intense from then on. Like it comments so much on society, on just humanity in general. And if you have grown up in a small town, I grew up in a small town, I feel like this will hit very close to home for you. Go in knowing that. Like it is just, please look up trigger warnings because there are some really intense scenes in this. Some really sensitive topics, but overall I thought it was like outstanding. I love the writing. I thought it touched on such prevalent, important topics that really need to be discussed so much. It kind of put you in the mind of all the people. I will say it took a little while for me to like get my head around everyone in this because there are definitely multiple POVs, except unlike like fantasy books or romance books where like each chapter will be a different person and you'll know because they'll have like the name on the chapter. This doesn't. You'll switch halfway through a chapter to a different perspective. And I found that a little bit hard. Definitely had to switch my brain on when I started reading it. So it took me a little while to like gather an understanding of our characters, of their relationships to each other, of our families, everything like that. But once I got a hand on that, it was so entertaining, like, and also addictive. I couldn't put it down. I kind of don't know what to rate this. I think I initially rated it at 5 stars, but it is so intense that I kind of feel weird rating it because of the topics that it's talked about. So we're just gonna say no rating for now. I might sit on it a little longer and figure it out soon, but for now it's no rating, but an insanely good book. I then did a reread for the month. This was probably my most like anticipated reread, and I've been wanting to do this for such a long time. I don't know why I didn't do it sooner. And that is Binding 13, the first book in the Boys of Tommen series. This time I annotated it, as you can see. I didn't annotate it the first time going in because I did not realize how much of a chokehold this series would have on me. I won't talk too much about this because I feel like I talk about this book all the time on my channel, but I will say it just kind of made me want to continue this series even more. It made me want to like jump into this universe again. Reading the first book and knowing what happens in the later books, they are on like dual timelines. At least Saving 6 and Redeeming 6 are on the same timelines as Binding and Keeping 13. And knowing what happens to our other characters, like when you don't know what's happening because you're only focused on Johnny and Shannon in this series, sorry, in this 2 books, but like having glimpses of our other characters and knowing what they're going through. There is so much foreshadowing in this book. There are so many just chilling lines. Again, please look up trigger warnings before you go into this because it is quite heavy. Whilst we are set in high school, it feels weird. To me, it doesn't feel like we're set in high school. To me, it feels like they're just so mature and so like there is so much intense stuff that goes on that it kind of just doesn't feel like they're actually just set in high school. So yeah, I would just look up trigger warnings before you go in, just so you go prepared. The attachment you form to these characters is unlike anything I have ever read. And I will say, I often get people being like, the first book sucked. Like, do I actually continue? I would recommend it because like, I do not know one person who's finished this series and still hates it. Like you form a connection to these characters that is just unlike anything else. So yeah, 5 stars for me, 6 stars, I don't know. I love this series. It's so sentimental to me now. Obsessed with these characters. I then picked up Wild Eyes by Elsie Silver. This is the second book in the Rose Hill series. This came out this month and I was just very excited for this. I read Wild Love, which is the first book, a month or 2 ago, and I did enjoy it. I probably didn't enjoy it as much as I've enjoyed some of her books, like Reckless from the Chestnut Spring series, my all-time favorite book by her. And Wild Love just kind of fell a little bit for me. It was still really entertaining, still great characters, all of that. But then Wild Eyes really restored my faith in this series. I feel like Elsie Silver is notorious for doing that. Like the books keep getting better as you go through the series, which just makes you more obsessed with it. So this is set in a small town. We are following Skylar and West. West is the brother of Ford from Wild Love, the first book in this series. And Skylar is a pop star, except she's kind of only just realized how detained she's been her whole life, and that her manager and her dad have been making every decision for her, like every single financial, career, personal decision. And her relationship that she was in was a complete setup for her image. So she's kind of heartbroken. She's just questioning everything about her, and she hears about his recording studio. So she goes to Rose Hill with the intent to find Ford and record some of her own music that she created. This is also like a single parent trope, and I loved the kids in this. They were so cute. West is a single parent with, well, he's got like joint custody obviously, and he has 2 kids. They are just so cute, and they really come out of their shell throughout the book. I just loved this book, honestly. I couldn't put it down. I binged it so quickly. Like if you're going into a book slump or just want a fun romance read, like Elsie Silver does it every single time. I don't know what it was about this. I can't say specifically, but I loved it. I really had the best time reading it. So I'm giving it a 4.25 stars. Definitely a lot better than the first book in this series, in my opinion. I'm so excited to see where this story goes, and we kind of get a little sneak peek at the end for what the next book in this series, like the characters we're following. So I'm very excited for that. I then finally read Wildfire by Hannah Grace. This has been on my TBR for like over a year now, and the new book in her series, Daydream, just came out, and I've been hearing such good things about that. So I was like, okay, I need to read Wildfire before I read Daydream. If you didn't know, Hannah Grace has written like an interconnected standalone series. They're all like hockey sports romances set in Maple Hill, so kind of set in like the same university. So first is Icebreaker, then Wildfire, and then her newest, Daydream. I read Icebreaker about a year ago, and I actually enjoyed it. I actually don't get what all the hate is about, but anyway, I thought it was fun. So I went in with like pretty like decent expectations for Wildfire, and it was good. I don't think it is my favorite. Like, I just thought it was a fun romance, honestly. It is set at a summer camp. Like, our 2 main characters are working at a summer camp, and I feel like that was really fun. Probably would have liked it if I read it more in the summer, because it is like still pretty cold here, but it was fun. It was really fun. I really like Russ as a main protagonist, as a love interest. I thought he was so good. I loved how kind of introverted and like shy he was as a guy. I feel like that doesn't often happen with like sports players' romances. And Aurora was just like the polar opposite of that. She was just so like bubbly and high energy, but like they both had their personal problems going on, and they both like worked through it together. The communication was key, which we love when they actually communicate with each other, and that's not like the biggest conflict. But yeah, I thought it was really fun. I just had a really fun time reading it. I read it really quickly. Honestly, I think because I read it so quickly, I kind of hate when this happens. I can't remember too much from it, but it was still good. I gave this a 3 stars, like just a fun little romance. I then picked up Grail. This is the 4th book in the Btown Chronicles by Lynette Noni. Obviously, I won't tell you much about this book in itself, but I'll explain the Btown Chronicles, otherwise it would be a spoiler. So the first book is Akane, and we are set at a magic school. You've probably heard me talk about this series because it has become my new obsession. We set at a magic school. It is a YA fantasy. We have the most amazing sense of found family. Basically, our main protagonist, Alex, is meant to be getting sent off to a boarding school for a little while because her parents, I think they're like archaeologists or something. They're going on a big research project. So she's going to a boarding school, except when she gets there, she accidentally falls into a magical land of Medora, and more specifically Akane, which is the magic school she is about to attend. She has magic blood in her, yet she didn't know it. She has like such good friends through it. I really like the found family in this. I think it is so sweet. And the series just gets so much more intense, so much more magical the more you go through it. Like every book, I'm like, yeah, okay, the world building has been established. Like it can't get more magical than this, and yet it does. Absolutely amazing. I loved it so much. I will say the first part I found a little bit slow, and I found it kind of hard to get through. The second half was insane. So much happening. I bawled my eyes out in this, and it takes a lot to make me cry. It takes a lot. This made me cry. Some of our characters in this are like some of my all-time favorite characters I've ever read about. I'm giving this book a 4.75 stars. The past book in this, Dracora, was a 5 stars. This one, just because it had a slower start, it didn't give me that same feeling, but like the end did, so I don't know. I'm just obsessed with this series overall. I think it is so much fun. If you're looking for like your new YA fantasy series obsession, like this is such a good place to go. And Lynette Noni just has such a magical way of writing, so yeah, loved this. And then the final book I read in September was Hopeless by Elsie Silver. Now this book was probably my least favorite book of the month and definitely my least favorite book of the Chestnut Springs series. So it is the 5th and final book in the Chestnut Springs series. So I have officially completed that series now. And we are following Beau, who is, I think is the oldest brother or one of the oldest brothers, but he is really good friends with Jasper from Powerless. And I feel like this book had so much of like the past characters in it. Like there were so many cameos from all of our characters throughout the series that it felt like I really loved those scenes. I loved seeing where everyone was. I loved seeing the couples outside of their books, like in like real world, their real world situations. I really, really liked that. This love story in itself though, I didn't connect to very much. I really wanted to connect to it a lot more than I did. I feel like I was just never really drawn to Beau as a character, and the love interest Bailey, I thought she was really fun. I thought she was really cool. But there are a few, like, I don't know, I feel like they suit each other really well. Like their characters suit each other so well. To me, I just didn't connect to any of it. They just, I don't know, there was something about it that I was just kind of like, oh, okay. There were also a few really weird scenes, like there's a bath scene that I just was kind of like, huh? I didn't really find that kind of stuff romantic. I don't know, maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just my experience. And just like those kind of few scenes and a few interactions made me a little bit hesitant about it. This is a fake dating, I would say, fake marriage kind of engagement, fake engagement trope. And it was also an age gap romance. As I said, I thought they had really good chemistry. I thought they had really good connection, but it just wasn't anything crazily good for me. So I gave it a 3 stars. It was like good, but I was kind of hoping a little bit more for like the conclusion to this series. And that is everything I read in the month of September. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you had a good reading month yourself. Thanks so much for watching today's video, my loves, and I will see you in my next video.